After America elected President Donald Trump in 2016, Washington insiders commissioned Russia investigations to reverse the election results, saying the hand of the Kremlin turned voters against Hillary Clinton. Using the full power of the United States government to end the Trump presidency, they destroyed innocent people, dozens of his associates, their families. I should know. My family was one of them. Trump aides' phone calls were traced, our texts and emails read, our offices and homes were searched. Massive legal costs, agents and informants spied on us here and abroad, until Special Counsel Robert Mueller concluded that nobody conspired with Russia at all. That strategy failed, and its origins are being investigated now. To kill that second inquiry before Russia hoax culprits are exposed, the anti-Trump Washington elite moved to impeach the president for a July 2019 telephone call with Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky. But our family knows better, and yours should too. This didn't just start with a phone call between two presidents. America's Ukraine problem didn't begin with Donald Trump at all. This whole thing started years ago and led to murders on the Maidan. On February 20th, 2014, 100 people were shot dead in 20 minutes on Independence Square in central Kiev. Ukrainians remember them as the Heavenly 100. Snipers shot down from nearby buildings at protesters and police alike. In total, 130 were killed, 23 policemen dead, 1,500 protesters injured. Maidan. That's what Ukrainians call Independence Square. It's a Turkish word they adopted long ago from the Ottoman Empire. During the protests, Maidan became synonymous for the revolution and the overthrow of the government. There's probably more spies, double agents, mercenaries, and phony diplomats in Kiev, Ukraine than anywhere in the world today, like Casablanca in the 40s. Many foreigners were influencing the Maidan protests since they began in late 2013, especially Russia, the United States, and the European Union. And it fast became a revolution. Leaders of Ukraine's Revolution of Dignity had meetings at the U.S. Embassy in Kiev. American officials like Senator John McCain and Victoria Nuland, an Assistant Secretary of State for President Barack Obama, visited protesters on the square.
How are you? Good to see you.
Of course, we felt the support of the entire Democratic world. When Senator McCain came to Maidan, I personally accompanied him, and it was very nice, very inspiring.
Some bread for you? Here's some bread. You're hungry. Come on.
I'll be honest, we are grateful even for cookies. America was making us into a hungry war dog through the embassy. It's a humiliation of our country, and it creates a negative attitude towards America.
I've often worked in Ukraine since 1995. I met my wife there. We have family there. When Obama's Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, reset U.S.-Russia relations in 2009, a new course was set. America's once muscular foreign policy in the region spun down and powered up Russian President Vladimir Putin.
As I recall, I was at Maidan right after the protests and right after the change in the government. You know, I remember at that time, the Obama administration, they only wanted to do what Putin wanted them to do. I mean, really, they would not ever step on Putin's toes in anything involved with Ukraine. And then, fast forward, we continued to give them money that they wouldn't spend on weapons that the Ukrainians were asking for. And I'm talking about after they had invaded Crimea and essentially annexed Crimea.
Translator, this is my last lecture for you. Yeah. And after my lecture, I have more flexibility. Yeah. And I transmit this information to Vladimir and Stanley.
Obama's State Department diplomats in Central and Eastern Europe followed a new path, the international progressive path. Places like Georgia and Ukraine were on the front lines of globalist policymaking. In Ukraine, it led to mass murder. Long expected to sign an association agreement with the European Union in late 2013, then President Viktor Yanukovych balked and leaned instead toward Russia and Vladimir Putin. This infuriated the West, and as a result, his opponents hit the streets of Kiev by the thousands. My brother-in-law visited the Maidan often after the protests started in November 2013. They began peacefully. After the New Year's holiday, though, protesters had guns, and clashes with police escalated. Anti-American critics say our country orchestrated the entire affair, in cahoots with progressive American billionaire George Soros. It's true, though, we've given millions to Soros organizations in places like Poland, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, the Balkans, Georgia, and Ukraine, even Russia. I had breakfast with Soros in Moscow when I worked for a Russian investment bank in 1999. He told me his donations put his progressive worldview into action, and, with a smile, he said it was good for business. In Ukraine, Soros Foundation leaders admit he spent more than $180 million since the early 90s fall of the Soviet Union. Really, what he's doing there is creating a progressive state. And he's worked closely with the American government. Under Obama, we back Soros 100%.
Yeah, I think some people, have to sit back and say, look, is this really the best use of taxpayer money? Right. And how much should we be getting involved in these countries, especially working with people who have agendas? And that's the challenge with the Soros groups is, these are people who have agendas. And I mean, everybody knows Soros is no secret. He's extreme left-wing, and he supports extreme left-wing causes. And what he would be doing in Ukraine, I'm not sure what it is. I know
building an extreme left-wing government.
Yeah, well,
it's the same thing they're doing in Georgia. Same thing they're doing across the region. Today, I see Soros' fingerprints across the former Soviet Union, Europe, and beyond. Open borders, mass migration, weakened judicial systems, civil unrest, the end of national sovereignty. It's not good. His groups target conservative politicians and destabilize elected governments.
I know George Soros, and I know some of his programs. It's kind of guy who, first of all, switches his sympathies fast, changes his mind fast, and his programs had been helpful in some cases, but most of the times they have not been terribly efficient.
He uses all possible means to influence election campaigns, to influence politics without any legitimacy, and that's the problem.
Negative opinions of George Soros are criticized as propaganda favoring Russia, hand of the Kremlin. Of course, that's not true. And when you criticize George Soros, you're called an anti-Semite. That's just a dog whistle. George Soros has an agenda, very clearly, and it deserves scrutiny.
Washington diplomat Victoria Nuland bought into that agenda and helped Soros implement it across Central and Eastern Europe. In 2017, during President Donald Trump's inauguration festivities in Washington, diplomats from Poland, Czech Republic, and Hungary begged Trump foreign policy associates to dump Nuland.
Nuland didn't want Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych. Soros didn't want him.
The message? Don't escalate the Maidan conflict or else. Still, it got worse on both sides.
We hold the Ukrainian government primarily responsible.
Don't escalate things on Maidan, they said, or else. Still, things got worse on both sides. By February, a leaked telephone conversation proved that Nuland was hand-picking the new government before Yanukovych had even fallen.
So I don't think Klitsch should go into the government. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's a good idea. I think Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, what he needs is Klitsch and Tony Book on the outside. He needs to be talking to them 4 times a week, I just think Klitsch going in, he's going to be at that level working for Yatsenyuk. It's just not going to work.
Yats, Klitsch, Nuland had nicknames for respected Ukrainian leaders, like pet pigs in a pen. It's shameful. The stress on the square got worse. A colleague of Sergei Pashinsky, a protest leader who met with U.S. diplomats, was stopped by protesters. He had a sniper rifle in his trunk. Pashinsky demanded the release of his associate and the return of his rifle. It was all caught on camera. 2 days later, February 20th, sniper bullets rained down on protesters and police alike.
Depending upon who you believe, those snipers were Ukrainian or Russian, Latvian, Georgian, even American. One thing everybody agrees on, they took up positions in buildings like Hotel Ukraine.
While Obama's diplomats debated who would control Ukraine,
according to these alleged witnesses, the shooters and their accomplices were in these rooms along the third-floor corridor of Hotel Ukraine facing Institutskaya Street. So they would come into the room, and the shooter would stand here, away from the window so nobody could see them, and the accomplice would simply open the window, step back, and the shooter would take their shot. So here, in the Institutskaya area, they shot down and killed many of the people who were murdered that morning.
It shook the Ukrainian people to their souls. Almost 6 years later, they still don't know who did it. According to Valentin Nalyvaichenko, the former head of the security service of Ukraine, the nation's FBI, the evidence his team gathered points to Russians.
I remember one part of the evidence where I have officially signed to the General Prosecutor's Office in 2014, where the Special Forces officers witnessed that they've seen pair of snipers at the Maidan talking Russian language. They were absolutely not from any official Special Forces group.
That's the version Obama, Biden, national security types are peddling. But they don't seem to talk about it much anymore. Why haven't we called for an investigation? This is the largest country in Europe. 100 people were killed in 20 minutes.
Most Americans don't know what's going on there on a daily basis. So it's out of sight, out of mind.
So when an officer from the Ukrainian National Police, the Berkut, Sergei Temtura, was released from prison in June 2019, you didn't hear a peep from the U.S. Embassy.
Protesters were behind us, and a big, heavy rock was thrown into the back of my head. As I remember, I lost consciousness. My helmet was cracked on my head. I saw a man running towards us with a Molotov cocktail, and the next moment I was burning. I was put in the ambulance and taken to the Ministry of Internal Affairs hospital.
Tell me about your weapon.
When they came to search me, they were looking for my weapon, claiming that it was missing. For 8 months, every time during court hearings, they demanded I remain in custody because they were saying I stole and destroyed my weapon to get rid of the evidence of the crime. Later, it was discovered that the Prosecutor General's office confiscated my weapons 6 months before I was arrested.
Prosecutors withheld key evidence, so Temtura served 5 useless years in prison. He's a broken man today. His life is ruined. And America, so devoted to a fight against corruption, did nothing. The lawyer for Berkut police officers still in custody tells another version of events.
I personally questioned witnesses, so-called Georgian snipers, who told me that they participated in the shooting. These witnesses informed us that among the organizers of the shooting of activists and police on Maidan were people like protest organizer Andrei Poruby, who became Speaker of the Parliament, and opposition leader Sergei Pashinsky. The goal of this shooting and goal of the snipers was to create chaos and show people that the Yanukovych government was using force against the people. The aim was not to allow Yanukovych to sign the peace agreement, which he signed in the end with the opposition, mediated and guaranteed by Europeans.
Then I heard it again. This version of the story is the hand of the Kremlin, Russian propaganda. So I had to figure this one out. Like Ukraine, Georgia has had violent conflict with Russia. Keeping Georgia close to the West, and not the Kremlin, is really important to Washington. The post-Soviet leadership of Georgia was heavily influenced by American national security agencies.
My colleagues had a close, almost tight relationship with them. With the FBI, CIA, DIA. We had an even more frequent relationship with them. And we were working with them almost daily.
The snipers, you're completely convinced that they were at least partly Georgian?
For sure, there were some Georgians, and I studied it well. In March of 2014, I made my first public statement that snipers who were shooting from Hotel Ukraine and the conservatory were from Georgian President Saakashvili's group. Of course, there were others, but the main actors were Saakashvili and his team.
These documentaries that are coming out now about like Israeli one and an Italian one or something that are saying that you were involved in the Maidan massacre.
Well, yeah, but that's pure Russian.
But where does that come from?
Well, obviously different sources. Well, the Maidan stuff is purely Russian invention. That's like, we are used to it. Like, that's how the Russian propaganda or Soviet propaganda used to work.
General Saakashvili's heard that before. Hand of the Kremlin, you know.
Accused of being under Kremlin influence in 2008 himself, his conflict with then-President Mikhail Saakashvili landed him in prison for 5 years. They nearly killed his son when he was arrested.
His son's still handicapped 10 years later. And again, America did nothing.
They got into contact with me, and I was invited to Ukraine by the order of President Poroshenko and Gristak. They promised me they would guarantee my financial well-being as long as I would twist the story. But I categorically refused.
Saakashvili was a golden boy in Washington. Soros backed him too, with his network of open society organizations. The billionaire even paid for a number of Georgian activists to go to Serbia and learn from Serbians who overthrew their president in 2000. Predictably, in late 2003, a bloodless coup toppled democratically elected President Eduard Shevardnadze, and Mikhail Saakashvili rose to power. 9 members of his cabinet were Soros acolytes. Some allegedly stayed on Soros's payroll. Backed by Soros and the George W. Bush administration, Saakashvili grew even closer to the Obama-Biden team, and really close to Vice President Joe Biden. So close, some say, that Saakashvili showed up in Ukraine for the Maidan protests.
How were you transferred from Tbilisi to Kiev for the Maidan project?
As I said before, our stay there was known to Mamuka Mamulashvili, Parubi, Poshinsky, Jean, and Saakashvili, of course with his entourage. They knew about everything. Parubi was in charge of accommodations, transport, weapons, and so on. The people who sent us there were Pashinsky, Saakashvili, his entourage, and Mamuka, of course. Saakashvili personally didn't recruit me, but Mamulashvili, his man, did. And behind all of this is Saakashvili. I've known Saakashvili since 1986.
You were spending time in Kiev monitoring Yanukovych's movements, right?
When I met with Georgy Lorkepinidze and Mikhail Saakashvili, Misha told me and the boys who were with me that there was one man with us who, as far as I know, was a member of the Ukraine Security Service. We were tasked with finding the irregular routes of Yanukovych. And let's put it this way, they were planning to assassinate Yanukovych. And later, foreigners came, locals with Mamuka, then officers, and so on. At that time, Misha came, and he was accompanied by an American. They were with Mamuka and former Georgian officers. And after that, everything got planned, and they explained to us what to do.
Who was that American officer?
It even made me laugh when I heard his name. I remembered Sergeant Brian from the movie. Brian was his first name. I don't know his real last name. I remembered Sergeant Brian from the movie. Brian was his first name. I don't know his real last name.
These self-described Georgian snipers claim that former Georgian President Saakashvili and Ukrainians like Andrei Parubi and Sergei Pashinsky directed their dirty work. All three of these Maidan protest leaders later joined the Poroshenko government. The Georgians also insisted an American soldier they called Brian Christopher helped organize the snipers.
Do you recognize this fellow? The upshot, if an American soldier was in there shooting, maybe the American government was involved in the murders. The Georgians even insisted that Joe Biden knew everything.
That's why I hired a private investigator to find U.S. Army veteran Brian Boyinger. The Georgians called him Brian Christopher. As it turns out, he lives in North Carolina today.
You know, your name's bandied about a lot by people who were telling some pretty exciting stories about you being on the Maidan in February of 2014.
Well, I mean, I don't know how that's possible because I didn't get there till February 18th, 2015.
Boyinger's American passport says he didn't arrive in Ukraine until a year after the Maidan massacre. The Georgians say they used fake passports to enter Ukraine before then. They claim Boyinger did too. But Boyinger was prepared. He says he was working back home in North Carolina and he had the receipts. A lot of them. His time card from a private company says he was working in North Carolina the entire week of the 2014 massacre.
I'm sickened by all of this. The Heavenly 100 are dead, cut down in the square. Somebody paid for it, and a lot of people are lying. It's intense.
One self-described Georgian sniper showed up at our interview wearing a mask. He said he feared for his life.
So you shot people on Maidan?
You can say that. It turned out that way. The order was to shoot at Birkut and at people to cause chaos. It started on the 20th around 8 a.m. We heard the first shot. There were two of us. I opened the window first, and my friend took the shot. Then we moved, and I took the gun. And this way we shot all 5 rounds.
And your mask is to hide from prosecution and from the people who ordered you to shoot.
Yes, more from those people.
What if you escape both of them, prosecution and the people who ordered you? Do you think the mask will hide you from God?
After the Maidan massacre, President Yanukovych left for Russia, and President Petro Poroshenko was elected. The United States Embassy played a big role. So did Soros, again.
Let's just be honest with each other. The American government, we stand strong against coups, unless, of course, we don't. Because sometimes a violent overthrow of a foreign government is in the United States' best interest. And even though it's uncomfortable to admit it, sometimes we're all good with a coup. The Maidan coup was one of them. More blood than Saakashvili's Rose Revolution, but the result was still optimal for the United States. The mass murder investigation seems to be stalled today, and most Ukrainians I know are sure they'll never know the true killers.
Shortly after the massacre, President Obama put Vice President Biden in charge of U.S.-Ukraine relations.
That was the assignment I got. I got all the good ones, so I got Ukraine.
So let me ask you, what is your opinion of Joe Biden's role after Maidan? I mean, how much he was interacting with the government. Did you think it was good?
He was coming as if he was giving orders to savages. You will not be prosecutor general. This here, this there. But this would have been only half of a problem.
You have a historic opportunity to be remembered as the rada that finally and permanently laid in place the pillars of freedom that your people have longed for.
So, what is the Budapest Memorandum?
It's a document signed in 1994 between the United States, Russia, Ukraine, and the UK to Ukraine to give away the 3rd largest nuclear arsenal in the world of nuclear warheads, more than 1,500 of them, and basically destroy them, give them away to Russia, and that's it. That was Ukraine got guarantees by that document from the United States, Russia, the UK, to support its sovereignty if any war is going to happen, if anybody attacks Ukraine, because we are giving away our nuclear warheads. We're not even leaving one, we're giving everything away. And basically that was the document to give us security for our sovereignty and independence of our country.
And Biden in April of 2014 said what?
It's a political document. It was just signed for you guys to be quiet. Just forget about it. We cannot give you more than blankets today.
So on Biden's statement, that was the reason why the United States did not support Ukraine and stop the Crimea.
It was Biden's statement. It was Obama's also unwilling to support Ukraine and their staff, but Biden was the main goer in Ukraine, and he said we cannot give you more than blankets today, because you're going to probably sell the weapons later on to Russians. We cannot trust you.
And I was saying all the time that javelins are one thing, but first give us other supplies, and then javelins. If they had helped us with tourniquets, radios, and javelins, then the situation would have been completely different. Unfortunately, the Obama administration was not answering Ukraine's challenges.
It didn't take long for the Biden family to make a lot of money off of Joe's leadership of Ukraine policy under Barack Obama. By April of 2014, Joe was meeting with the directors of Burisma Energy, this company right here. By May, his son Hunter Biden had joined that very same board, and he's made millions since May of 2014. He knows absolutely nothing about energy.
President Trump's son Eric said it best. Board members of ExxonMobil, one of the world's largest and most prestigious energy companies, make $330,000 annually. Hunter Biden, with no industry experience, was being paid $600,000 annually at least for 5 years. All of this while the average annual salary in Ukraine is $1,700 a year. Hunter Biden made 350 times more than the average Ukrainian.
How do Ukrainians see things like Biden on the board of Burisma. What does that look like to the Ukrainian people?
We never seen them. Me, even as a member of opposition to Yanukovych, we never knew that Hunter Biden or anybody else were on this board of Burisma, I guess, company. It was, you know, it's always in Ukraine, especially with the corruption at the top, it's very dark territory. If you're not in the government, if you are not in this corrupt case or corrupt company, you'll never know what is going on in there.
He started doing business through his children. The Burisma story is not fully open. America is an example of the fight against corruption and an example of openness. But they brought something completely different to Ukraine. Now it seems elite Americans can do anything here because we are savages.
Almost 2 years after Hunter Biden started cashing his big Burisma checks, the Obama White House started coaxing the Poroshenko government into the 2016 U.S. elections.
According to remarkable reporting by John Solomon at The Hill, the Obama-Biden team brought some of Ukraine's top corruption prosecutors and investigators face-to-face with members of the National Security Team in Washington. The State Department, the Department of Justice, the FBI, the NSC, and the CIA.
In late January in 2016, where we had the head of NABU, Mr. Sitnik, the special prosecutor, Mr. Holodnitsky, and the deputy prosecutor general, Separadidze, in Washington, having a week trip to D.C. talking with the DOJ, FBI, and the National Security Council. The embassy was blocked from most of the meetings except the National Security Council meeting in the White House, which we also helped arrange. And basically, during that meeting, the question came up, what about, do you have any information right from the White House people, basically Biden's people, what is the situation on people's party regions' assets and their bank accounts or any money transfers that you can give us that we can look into? This was together with the DOJ, with FBI, Mr. Jeff Cole, people like Zentos from National Security Council.
That was January 2016 when candidate Donald Trump was starting to surge. In fact, all the Obama team wanted to talk about with the Ukrainians was Paul Manafort's client in the region, President Yanukovych and his party of regions, and dropping the investigation into Burisma.
That Burisma case was key. The investigation led by Ukrainian prosecutor Viktor Shokin was getting way too close to Hunter Biden.
I took this document, which shows how many criminal cases were against Burisma. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We started to move forward actively, and I believe it was obvious that we would arrive at the moment when we would indict Hunter Biden and Kovasnevsky and other hired representatives who had influence in the USA.
Joe Biden thought Shokin should be fired, so on a visit to Kiev, the vice president himself brought the case up with Ukrainian President Poroshenko.
They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting $1 billion. I said, you're not getting $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, what, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
That solid guy, as Biden called him, wasn't even an attorney. And he's been accused by the families of those murdered on Maidan of dragging his feet on those investigations into who actually shot and killed all those innocent people. In fact, the only accountability that Yuri Lutsenko, the new prosecutor general, seemed to be concerned about was getting a conviction of the former president, Viktor Yanukovych. The Heavenly 100, not so much.
Democrats and their conjugal media claim Shokin got fired for being soft on corruption. But Shokin himself swore in an international court deposition that President Poroshenko told him personally he was fired for investigating Hunter Biden.
Joe Biden demands for me to be removed, and I asked, how will you explain this? I was getting the best results in all directions. No corruption, and so on. How can you explain the prosecutor general leaving? For health reasons? I'm a healthy man. Poroshenko told me I'll figure out something.
While the vice president's son got rich at Burisma Energy, U.S. presidential campaign activity heated up.
Coincidentally, so did Victoria Nuland's communications with the Soros team. According to the Hill Solomon, Soros staffers even admitted this and called the frequency of contact unusual. According to the Financial Times, Adrian Kiernitzky, a senior fellow at Washington's Atlantic Council, said key Ukrainian political figures are getting involved to an unprecedented degree and trying to weaken the Trump bandwagon. He should know. Burisma bankrolled the Atlantic Council. So does George Soros. And Nellie Orr, the Fusion GPS staffer researching Trump's campaign for Hillary Clinton, and married to senior FBI leader Bruce Orr, she told Congress some of her dirt for the Hillary campaign came from a Ukrainian parliament member. And you'll never believe who the British spy working with her, Christopher Steele, briefed on Russian active measures. Victoria Nuland and her Obama State Department colleagues.
At what point did you become aware of Mr. Steele's efforts?
I was first shown excerpts from the dossier, I believe, in mid-July of 2016. It wasn't the complete thing, which I didn't see until it was published in the U.S. press.
Sure.
Valerie Chally was ambassador to the United States here in this building, the Ukrainian embassy in Washington, D.C. He quit in July 2019 after President Poroshenko was defeated at the polls. But according to Andrei Telezhenko, an aide to Chally here at the embassy, this building was a hotbed of anti-Trump activity in 2016. Did you feel like the Ukrainian embassy in Washington was in the tank for Hillary Clinton and the DNC?
From what I saw, yes. Also, Oksana Shulyar was reporting to Chally about her connections within the Hillary campaigning office, which she had really close relationship with people there. I asked the ambassador, let's meet not only with Senator Cruz, who I met with when he was in South Carolina, and Kasich, but let's meet also with President-elect, the presidential candidate Trump at that time, and just talk to him, just see what he is about, talk about Ukraine, and have a contact there so we can do our work. Like everybody talks to every campaign office. It's a normal relationship within embassies. We don't have to go into anybody's pocket and just do somebody's work. Let them do their work, and we just have to do our work for Ukraine. He told me, don't do this, don't get involved, I will never get involved. We have an official order from Kiev not to get involved with the Trump campaign because they're pro-Russian. That's his quote of what he's saying to me. Poroshenko's orders not to talk to the Trump campaign officials. That was the main thing. Even when Poroshenko was coming to Washington, they only met with Hillary Clinton. There was no meeting with Trump when Poroshenko was going to campaign time, coming to Washington.
Alexandra Chalupa of the Democratic National Committee and the Clinton campaign worked with a foreign nation to dig up dirt on the Trump team.
As the leaker who triggered the 2019 House impeachment hearings came into focus, we learned Chalupa met with him many times in the Obama White House as her 2016 anti-Trump work with Ukraine's Washington embassy unfolded.
She even pressed the Ukraine embassy to leak to American reporters. Clearly, Chalupa needs to be investigated, and her partner, Ambassador Chally, too.
Because I used to work for the prosecutor's office, I was advisor to the Prosecutor General of Ukraine, I was advisor to the First Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine. Basically, I had connection to high government, and they didn't want to do it all official. They had this channel through the Ambassador Chally. Apparently, I found out later that he was on board on this because I told him we should not get involved. We should stop talking to her, because this is not right. If we get caught, this is going to be all illegal. It's not legit. Our countries are going to have troubles with their connections, because can you imagine if, for example, Mr. Trump is going to win, and then what's going to happen later? And he said everything's being taken care of. That's when we got our attentions with Chally after a couple of months out of the embassy. But that was the story with Chalupa. She officially went to the Ukrainian embassy, knowing that I was an official asking for information to take down a presidential candidate or people within his campaign office. For me, that was a shock.
I bet. And it seems that the approval for that process went all the way to the ambassador.
Ambassador, and from what I know, the president of Ukraine, Poroshenko.
Late in the presidential election, a member of parliament named Sergei Lyshenko, another Poroshenko ally, gave the U.S. media pages from what he claimed was a ledger noting illegal payments to Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort. Deeply involved in the mysterious ledger, Nabu, an independent anti-corruption agency closely tied to the United States Embassy.
A gentleman by the name of Lyshenko,
yes,
who supplied a black book that was found to be fraudulent.
Okay.
And never used because it was a fraudulent, incriminating statement that was totally untrue.
But when the Ukrainian government moved to investigate Soros's Anti-Corruption Action Center, who stopped it? Victoria Nuland did, and the United States Embassy in Kyiv. Manafort denied the payments, but he quickly resigned from the Trump campaign. NABU director Artyom Sitnik admitted in an audio recording that he meant to help Hillary Clinton.
Я думаю, что да. Я же ему тоже помогу, ему, Хиллари помогла. А Хиллари все как бы из тих політиків, що вони гегемонія Америки в світі. Для нас как бы так лучше. А для американців лучше так. Це те, що Трамп робить.
On the campaign battlefield, if you take out the general, you can cripple your opponent. But with Manafort gone, the Trump campaign kept moving forward. A remarkable feat. In the end, Trump won, against all odds.
Even before President Trump was inaugurated, news of official Ukraine's work to stop Donald Trump from being elected was exposed. While at Politico, Ken Vogel of the New York Times and David Stern wrote about Chalupa's activities, the Black Ledger, and more.
Mr. Caputo, even on the camera or without it, we are talking about the truth. You please have no doubt that Valentin and Michael are now 100% transparently talking the truth. On this case, on this possible interference, I think you are right. Ex-President Poroshenko, one person. Then he, I think so, he involved and asked Special Service of Ukraine, SBU, to take a part. Then he involved one of his MP from his fraction of the parliament. Then Ukrainian embassy and many other Ukrainians, including NABU director, were involved in this, I think, criminal activity.
As the new Trump administration tried to investigate these activities, the Obama-Biden holdover ambassador in Kyiv, Marie Yovanovitch, was accused of blocking visas for Ukrainian officials flying to America to present evidence about Hunter Biden. As a result, President Trump recalled her from Ukraine for disobeying his orders. Biden's hold on U.S.-Ukraine policy created a revolving door. National security officers transferred from our Kyiv embassy to the White House as the U.S. presidential campaign got underway. Other intelligence types from the White House traveled back and forth to Ukraine frequently, often with Joe Biden.
I think I tend to be in more direct conversation for longer periods of time with the president than with my wife.
Army Lieutenant Colonel Alex Vindman returned to Washington from our Kyiv embassy to later join the Trump White House and testify against the president. They all knew about Hunter Biden's game at Burisma, and they said nothing.
Some individuals who are trained in the dark arts clearly have left the reservation, who have taken their talent, skills, and experience, and instead of being true to their oath of office, have decided to engage politically to support a party and a set of beliefs, not facts, that represent the interest of the Democrat parties.
Many of these people who helped Biden in Ukraine and Georgia are still in the government. Insiders speculate that one of these people is the whistleblower who kicked off the Democrats' impeachment proceedings. The new destroy Trump strategy, creation of an impeachment scandal based upon Ukraine, doesn't for an instant take into account that the bitter American power struggle could devour the faraway republic.
But it doesn't matter to Democrats. They'll destroy everything if they can stop Donald Trump. Aid may falter from the U.S. and the European Union. The global balance might tilt. And Putin's troops are there in Ukraine waiting.
Western elites have been dipping their beaks into Ukraine for 3 decades, picking at their bones, pushing them around, and cashing in. We know Joe Biden's kid has been getting rich in the corrupt gas business there. How many children of the 535 congressmen and senators in the United States are cashing in? Think about that.
Ukrainians want absolutely nothing at all to do with American impeachment. They've suffered enough. They deserve better. More than anything, the Ukrainian people deserve to know the truth about who killed their family and their friends on Maidan.
Now, everything depends on the new president of Ukraine. If Mr. Zelensky has the will to give an order to start an honest investigation, my military experts and I are willing to cooperate with this investigation and give them the real picture. In fact, everything was investigated. Almost all the participants, with the exception of 5, are in Russian Federation. They're under the protection of Russian Federation and received citizenship of Russian Federation. They are also now leading the same Birkut, which in Moscow is called Oman.
Oh yeah, Pashinsky. As we were finishing up this film, the Maidan protest leader with the sniper rifle, the Poroshenko politician, he was thrown in prison without bail for shooting an unarmed man.
Ukraine Gate, Russia Gate, Maidan. The players overlap and the strategies are so similar. In Ukraine, this game of risk got 130 innocent people killed. Democratic assistance, democracy promotion, civil society support. Call it whatever you will. These are bureaucratic buzzwords for meddling in foreign elections. And, of course, George Soros is the king of that scene. Soros is very active in the United States. After investing $10.6 million in Hillary Clinton's losing 2016 campaign, Soros is pouring money into anti-Trump activity in the United States. $4 million to American Bridge, $3 million to a Center for American Progress, $5 million to Democracy PAC, Media Matters for America. You name a progressive liberal group, and there's a good chance you'll find Soros money. The guy gives $1 billion every year to progressive causes. The November 2016 protest demanding election recounts, Soros paid for that. The Women's March after Trump's inauguration, Soros paid for a lot of that too, pink hats and all. And the deceitful Fusion GPS dossier that kicked off the Russia investigations, the group behind that is funded by Soros even today. Black Lives Matter anti-police protests, the radical actions against Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, Soros paid for that too.
First, they created the Russia hoax and failed to destroy President Trump. Look at impeachment. You'll see familiar faces. Recognize familiar tactics.
Don't think it can't happen here.
These 100 people here, memorialized in these plaques, could be Americans. The way things are going in America, it is just as believable that something like this could happen. We don't know who did it yet in Ukraine. Clearly, whoever did it was trying to cause bigger trouble than they already had. The kind of trouble that really moves governments. The kind of trouble that destroys governments. The second stage of the Democrats' Get Trump plan is criminalizing Donald Trump's request of the Ukrainian president to help him get to the bottom of the Democrats' first stage action, commissioning bogus Russia investigations that destroyed so many innocent Americans.
If the intelligence agencies, especially the FBI, if they don't clean up their act, if people don't pay the price for the fraud that was created on the FISA court and all of this that happened in the Russia hoax, if people are not held accountable, you're going to have generations of Americans, part of the Republican Party, who will never trust the FBI, the Department of Justice, the CIA, et cetera, for many generations.
President Trump is determined to investigate, and for good reason.
Ukraine has long been a playground for global insiders seeking power and money. Insiders like Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and George Soros. Meddling like this led to mass murder on the Maidan. If the U.S. refuses to investigate Burisma scams and Poroshenko's meddling in our 2016 elections, we will prove more corrupt than Ukraine, where they're eager to investigate these credible allegations. The Zelensky government must not pay a price for his predecessor interfering in the American elections.
Both nations must investigate what really happened in 2016. It's clear Ukraine helped Hillary Clinton frame Trump. And neither country can move on until we do investigate. But as Democrats pursue Trump, they're destroying America and Ukraine. And we can't let that happen.
Thomas Jefferson once said, "The time to guard against corruption and tyranny is before they shall have gotten hold of us." He said it's better to keep the wolves out than to try to stop them after they've come inside. But ladies and gentlemen, the wolves are already here.
This afternoon, a group of outrageous criminals, lawless individuals, attacked our office. Right now, we have 7 officers that have serious injuries, including broken bones, and 1 officer who is unconscious.
Police reported there were 21 officers injured, 1 officer suffering a spinal fracture after police say a concrete block was dropped on his head.
Then 3 more shots from Smith's .22 caliber handgun.
No, they falling up! Oh, they not stopping!
More than 100 people were arrested in Baton Rouge, with police saying they confiscated multiple guns, largely blaming protesters who had come from out of town for causing problems.
Into chaos. Gunfire rang out. Police used their patrol cars for cover as they moved in to help wounded officers. The search for the gunmen moved through downtown, from buildings to restaurants, businesses, and hotels.
Hands down! Don't shoot! Hands down! Don't shoot! Black, white, brown, tall!
We are always outnumbered.
Dozens of protesters clad in black and wearing face masks and helmets prepared themselves for confrontations with the police at a city park in the morning.
Nearly 2,000 National Guard troops are here and lining the streets in what is still a state of emergency.